Hi, my name is Jocelyn Thorpe and I'm a settler scholar at the University of Manitoba on Treaty 1 territory. And I'm so excited to be part of this project. So thank you to Chelsea Vowell who wrote the article that led to the idea for this project. And thank you also to Zoe Todd, Erica Lee, and Joseph Murdoch Flowers for putting the idea into action. I love the word, Zoe, on your website where you say that this way anyone can hear the report so that it is not shelved like so many before it, but brought to life. So with that in mind, I am going to read pages 267 to 269 of the summary of the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One of the aspects of the doctrine of discovery that continues to assert itself to this day is the fact that court cases involving Aboriginal territorial claims have placed a heavy onus on Aboriginal claimants to prove that they were in occupation of land since first contact and that the rights claimed over the territory continued from then to the present. The Commission believes that there is good reason to question this requirement, particularly in view of the fact that much of the record upon which courts rely is documentary proof or oral testimony from acknowledged elder experts. History shows that for many years after Confederation, Aboriginal claimants were precluded from accessing legal advice or the courts in order to assert their claims, and that many of their best elder experts have passed on without having had an opportunity to record their evidence. The Commission believes that it is manifestly unfair for Aboriginal claimants to be held to the requisite standard of proof throughout legal proceedings. However, it is reasonable to require that an Aboriginal claimant establish occupation of specified territory at the requisite period of time. That could be at the time of contact or at the time of Crown assertion of sovereignty. It is our view that once occupation has been proven, then the onus should shift to the other party to show that the claim no longer exists, either through extinguishment, surrender, or some other valid legal means. Therefore, we conclude that Aboriginal claims of title and rights should be accepted on assertion, with the burden of proof placed on those who object to such claims. The report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples emphasized that the restoration of civic trust is essential to reconciliation. It concluded that the purpose of engaging in a transaction of acknowledgement and forgiveness is not to bind Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in a repeating drama of blame and guilt, but jointly to acknowledge the past so that both sides are freed to embrace a shared future with a measure of trust. The report added that the restoration of trust is essential to the great enterprise of forging peaceful relations. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada agrees with these findings. For reconciliation to take root, Canada, as the party to the relationship that has breached that trust, has the primary obligation to do the work needed to regain the trust of Aboriginal peoples. It is our view that at the time of Confederation and in subsequent treaty negotiations, Aboriginal peoples placed a great deal of faith in the words of those speaking for the Crown that the new relationship would be a positive one for both of them. That faith was betrayed, however, by the imposition of the Indian Act, the development of the residential school system, and a series of other repressive measures. Survivors have indicated that despite the settlement agreement and Canada's apology, trust has not yet been restored. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Indian Residential Schools Survivor Committee member Eugene Arcon said, "I was there at the apology. I thought I was on my way to reconciliation when I heard the Prime Minister's words, in a way, when his voice trembled. It would be remiss of me to the survivors of Saskatchewan and survivors across this country to not talk about what's happened since the apology. It's been difficult to talk on one side of my mouth about reconciliation and truth, and on the other side of my heart I have very intense feelings about the actions of the federal government, Prime Minister Harper who gave that apology, and the Ministry of Indian Affairs in the administration of this agreement and other acts of government that have been an assault on our people. We as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, especially residential school survivors, want to reconcile. We really, really want to. But it's difficult when we see and feel and read what's coming out of the House, provincially, federally, in regards to our well-being. First with the cuts to the Aboriginal Healing Foundation and other cuts that have happened in regards to education, in regards to our livelihood. A government apology sends a powerful symbolic message to citizens that the state's actions were wrong. As important as Canada's apology was, it did not simply mark a closure of the past. It also created an opening for Canadians to begin a national dialogue about restoring Aboriginal peoples to a just and rightful place in Canada. In their evaluation of where things stood in the years immediately following the apology, Aboriginal leaders identified a post-apology gap between the aspirational language of Canada's apology and Aboriginal peoples' continuing realities. Closing this gap is vital to reconciliation. Speaking to the Senate on June 11th, 2009, the first anniversary of Canada's apology, Assembly of First Nations National Chief Phil Fontaine, who is also a survivor, said, and the rest of my section is quite a long quote from Phil Fontaine. In a post-apology era, the honor of the Crown must be a defining feature in the new relationship, where legal obligations are vigilantly observed, where First Nations are diligently consulted and accommodated on all matters affecting our lives, and our right to free, prior, and informed consent is respected. Let it be clear that First Nations care deeply about our human rights, the human rights of the women in our communities, our children, our families, and our communities. The principles of reconciliation, such as mutual respect, coexistence, fairness, meaningful dialogue, and mutual recognition, are not empty words. These principles are about action. That is, they give shape and expression to the material, political, and legal elements of reconciliation. It has been an eventful year in Canadian and global politics, society, and economy since last June. First Nations have been affected by the decisions of the Government of Canada during this time. Given the level of poverty among First Nations, our economies and communities are at an alarmingly high risk of sinking further into the bleakness and despair of poverty. We as a society must not let this happen. If this partnership between all founding peoples of the Federation is to be meaningful, mutual responsibility and accountability must also define the relationship. Reconciliation, then, implies a solemn duty to act, a responsibility to engage, and an obligation to fulfill the promises inherent in an advanced democratic and ethical citizenship. That is, the Government of Canada, in fact, all members of Parliament in both houses, has a responsibility to bridge the past to a future in which the gap in the quality of life and well-being between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people vanishes, where First Nations poverty is eradicated, where our children have the same opportunities and life chances as other children, and the promises of our treaties are fulfilled. Reconciliation must mean real change for all of our people in all of the places we choose to live, changes that address the wrongs in a way that bring us all closer together. Human rights, hope, opportunity, and human flourishing are not the privilege of one group or one segment of Canadian society. They belong to all of us. Achieving an apology is not an endpoint.